I've got a pretty strong rule that I don't tell people how to farm, and I definitely don't tell people how to farm in areas outside of where I live. That said, here I am about to break my own rule. Seeing a lot of posts on social media about the drought and lack of moisture in the eastern corn belt in a lot of corn growing acres. Either fortunately or unfortunately, in my geography, we deal with drought stress to some level every year. So I've got a few pieces of advice or tips and tricks that you might want to consider if you are dealing with drought and you're not accustomed to that. So first of all is that in terms of drought stress, and when I get worried, especially early season with drought stress, would be when we're seeing that corn pineapple up and it's not recovering overnight and it's still pineappled up first thing in the morning. So what I mean by that is late in the afternoon when it's hot, it's dry, we expect that plant to pineapple up. Those stomata are closing, it's conserving as much moisture as it can. It's just like us, it wants to get out of the heat. That's normal, we expect that. However, if that plant never recovers and overnight it doesn't have the ability to open those stomata again and recover, and you're going out first thing in the morning and doing field checks and you still see plants that are pineappled up, that is where we would expect to see some detriment to yield. Now, in terms of yield potential, there are a few things about drought that I honestly early season think can have a positive, and that's that when we're dry early, it forces that plant to root down. Now, cosmetically in the field, it looks rough, but that said, those roots should be exploring a lot more soil, searching for moisture, and I'd much rather have that drought stress early versus having ideal conditions where we have a lot of moisture early on and then have those dry conditions later on. Now, it's easy to say this environment is terrible, our yield potential is just, gone out the window. And depending on what conditions you have, you've got a lot of management factors that you can make decisions on that are still going to impact that yield. Remember, yield is genetics by environment by management. So if the environment we can't change or do anything about, especially if we don't have irrigation, we have to depend on the genetics, which today are far better than they've ever been, as well as management. So if you have drought stress corn or drought stress crop, we want to ensure that the only thing that plant has to worry about is managing through that drought stress. So fertility is very important. Weed control is very important. Anything that causes stress to that plant, we want to eliminate if possible. In terms of management, the other thing right now in early season when we're doing those post applications and side dress applications is to remember that when it comes to fertility, mass flow is a gradient of moisture. If moisture is lacking, now more than ever, you need to be very, very conscientious in your fertility program. If we don't have the moisture gradient there, we need to make sure that we've got it in the soil where the plant can take it up. My major professor in soil fertility used to always say that the good years take care of themselves. You need to fertilize for the bad years. And that's just to point out that when we have these stress conditions, that's when we need to help that plant out in making sure it has the groceries it needs available for uptake. So that all to say, we got a long ways to go. I know that as we look at this V6 stage and the plant is determining kernels around, and if we're under stress, then there goes all of our yield potential. But I do truly feel like, and this may be controversial, that the genetics that we have today are very well equipped to deal with this type of stress. And I wouldn't expect a lot of corn to necessarily give up rows around based off of the drought stress that you have. I guess the final thing that I would tell you is that we don't control the weather. It constantly reminds us that we don't control it. So, find a good support system if you're having a lot of difficult times dealing with the weather conditions and the drought stress and the overall stress that it's causing you. control the controllables, and everything else kind of just have to sit back and wait and see what time brings.